Hey guys, today I'm going to be going over my qualifier weekend from about a month ago with Jetstorm. I've been busy with some school stuff and just like kind of brewing in the new set. This hand is a turn 2 Necro with Grief, so we're going to keep. Very workable hand here. We're going to pitch the DI, right? We're going to evoke Grief and sack it to tower, and I'm going to see what they're on right now. And I see that they're on Red-Black Phoenix Scam, which I don't have a ton of experience playing against in best of 3. And kind of just something to note is in the past, I've handpicked games that I think are really interesting, whereas this is just a full qualifier weekend of like high level play and timeless. But the games are not necessarily all like very interesting on their own, right? Like this is a very dry board state. But yeah, I think it's interesting to like see like a quote unquote like uncut version of just like a tournament weekend. And so because they have no pressure in play, we're gonna go pretty deep on Necro. So we're gonna just draw for 10 cards. We don't have any action, like, you know, Necro, second Necro and Tower are both pretty dead. So, you know, just go for 10. Actually, like, again, I don't have a lot of experience with this matchup, but, you know, it's like I go to 10 because I'm like, quote unquote, playing around like Phoenix scamming, but uh, I don't think that's correct. Like, I think I can actually just afford to go deeper because if you think about their Phoenix combo, it usually takes like 3 resources to get there, right? It's like Dark Ritual, Buried Alive, and then another free spell, and only have 1 random card, so they can't even Phoenix Scam next turn. The best that they could have is like Sorin, like Dark Ritual, or like land into Sorin, right? Or just a Sorin top deck, right? So they really only have Sorin outs for next turn to really pressure me. So there's like an argument that I could go deeper. It does make me a bit weaker to Thoughtseize that are top decked, which I know they have, but yeah, I think with more experience, I would maybe go deeper in this matchup. And like we do whiff pretty hard. But our opponents had enough and they end up giving up anyways. But like even with that set of cards, we had like a good play, and we were gonna get to start grief looping them. Let's see. Okay, and again, I don't have a lot of experience sideboarding in this matchup. All I know is that the Accursed Marauder is probably good against their like single threats, and the Surgicals are good against their Phoenixes. I think the Griefs are a bit weird in that like they have a lot of synergy packed into their deck, but they also play Reanimate. And so I am kind of just giving them a reanimate target sometimes with it. Or like I'm giving them top deck outs to reanimate. I will also say, and it's also like we're higher, we're one of the highest resource combo decks in the format, like because we need a 5-card combo. Whereas their deck only needs about like 3 resources, which is, you know, like 3 spells for Phoenix Scam or 2 resources for their Soren Scam, right? So it's possible Grief is just not the best here because it is requiring us to invest a lot of resources to interact with them, and we don't rebuild as easily as they do unless we have like specifically Necro in play. Again, I've just never played this matchup in best of 3 because it's pretty much strictly a best of 1 deck as far as I know. So this hand is a creature away from being really good, and we're on the draw. And we can also just cast Grief on turn 2 with Ritual if we need to. So I think I'm okay keeping this. I also had like not the best run of variants in the week like leading up to testing for Timeless qualifier weekend, and so I think I was definitely a bit more timid with my mulligan decisions. Also, I'm on the draw and I know they have Dotties and Grief Scam, so I kind of want to keep higher resources, but I am like being more timid in general with my mulligans this weekend. And they get the Soren Scam start, which sucks. And basically threatens to take over the game, but we do draw a March, which kind of lets us basically like trade off our whole hand for the Vein Ripper. And that'll make our future Necros better. And Yeah, we're basically just trading hands at this point, but they're going to get to keep a Sorin in play, which kind of sucks. And we're not going to have any pressure on the Sorin. And they tend to need less resources than us to generate pressure with like Reanimate and the Sorin down take. So this isn't the best case. I mean, this is a terrible scenario for us, but it's like workable. And we can't use Phyrexian Tower on Grief because we need to pay the ward trigger on Vein Ripper. And like getting the snipe to reanimate is like nice, but again, I mean, Phyrexian Tower number 2, or no, sorry, it's Phyrexian Tower number 1, but basically like we just both have lands, but he has a Sorin, right? And then again, he has reanimate top decks and like different outs like that. So I mean, we have all of our necro outs, which is good, but we don't have like all of our DI outs are going to be shut off until we can get a creature. So like, I would say we're not favored in this spot, but like it's a decently close game right now, and we're at 22, right? And they again they don't have pressure on us. Phyrexian Tower was not the best top deck there. Probably worst card in our deck to top deck. Because at least like if you top deck a DI, you can eventually draw to it, to a card that like turns it on. Whereas like Phyrexian Tower is pretty much going to be dead. And they are like at this point they can scam Sorin again, which is just something you really have to actively be aware of. Okay, and we get a Haywire Might, so we this is going to turn on our DI top decks now, which is good. But notably, we wouldn't have the mana to cast Necro off of a DI right now because we'd use our creature for DI and then we wouldn't have the black sources. Thankfully, they thought season we have a tower and we've correctly played around it by top decking poorly. And they still don't have a scam. And we do top deck the demonic tutor. We top deck a demonic tutor, which means that we can actually get our attack in and then go for the Necropotence play by just basically like investing our whole board into it. Or like our whole board and our whole hand on this Necro. So we can basically generate, we have access to 5 mana right now. And I just have to tap and make sure that I'm not, I make sure that I use the colorless for my second tower on the demonic tutor so that I can have the pips to pay for Necropotence. So we're going to DT for Necropotence and hopefully pull ahead. And they end up having the flute as their last card in hand. So we're locked out of the game. Game's over. This sucks, but like they had a top deck the flute, and I know that you can see that they're holding priority, but the issue is that they could have just as easily been holding a ritual or a surgical and not the flute. And like we don't really have a tutor target that generates enough pressure to take over the game and close out the game in a meaningful way besides Necropotence. So I think the correct play there is to jam, and they just happen to have the flute, and that sucks. But given the circumstances, I think that's the best play is to just jam Necro. You can't, if you're playing Necro, you can't live in fear of like getting top decked by a flute and then playing flute. Like that's just gonna happen sometimes, but like you're gonna give up so many more games where you could have resolved a Necro that was unchecked, versus like playing in fear and like not tutoring for the best card in your deck. So I think that's the correct play there. Sucks that they had the flute, but you know, we go to game 3. All right, easy mole, no lands on the play. Probably a mole too. We just don't have a lot to work with. Yeah, would really like if one of these cards is a nightmare. I think this you could argue keeping this. I think that'd be fine. Or like even just like a tower over like one or like over like a might or something. The hand gets much better. We're gonna go to 5. I don't think we have better four. Like we do have some better fours, but I think this hand's like okay, and like having the Accursed Marauder gives us a backup out to their if they have like a Vein Ripper start. I haven't seen a Linda from them, but I'm assuming they're also on a Linda. Like it's kind of crazy to play Soren without a Linda. And you could argue is that like again, I don't know if Grief is good in this matchup because Grief is we're losing resources on it when we don't have Tower, and the issue is like they can one they can reanimate it, and two like we're investing a lot of our resources while being the higher resource combo deck, and their hands like kind of just mid. Um, Forget what I think Buried Alive is like the most threatening card that doesn't really do a lot. All the other cards are kind of dead against us, or just like not very like you don't want to give them reanimate targets. You don't really want to put Phoenix in the bin. Fatal Push is like just not that good against us. We're gonna get our 1/1 beats on. This is not exactly where we want to be, but like we have some outs. And they do just top deck reanimate to hit our grief, which like really sucks. So we've like basically like invested 2 resources into our, like evoking our grief, and they top deck a card which like 2 for 1s us back. So it's like we're just super down on resource. Like we're basically down 3 resources because of evoking grief, in a way. So that's not good. But they are at 12 life, and like we do have like sequences where like if we can draw like a nightmare plus a like apprentice or something, like we can force a lot of pings on them. And at this point, I'm making the read that they're not going to use a fatal push on my gas. So I am going to go ahead and attack, even though it's really bad if they fatal push it. I've been trying to stick to more like read based play and like kind of understanding what my opponent is trying to do. So they technically could have fatal pushed during combat, but they haven't done that in the past 2 turns. So we're going to get our attack in and then DI for Necro. And we know that they're going to be able to hardcast Phoenix next turn, and they are 1 card away from hardcasting Vein Ripper. So like even that we're getting Necro down, we're not in a super good spot. And like again, I think a lot of this is caused by evoking grief, honestly. So like I think in future matchups with this, I'm probably going to take out my griefs because while they're okay, like they're decent for us, they're just too much of a resource for reanimate, and they're like more clunky draws, and they cost us resources. Because like if they didn't have that in play, we could have had like another 1-drop in play, and then maybe another relevant card that's not grief, and they don't get to reanimate grief, and so like they're doing a lot less damage to us, and we have a lot more cards available to us for like marches and stuff like that. So we are gonna have to like go deep on the Necro though, because we kind of need to like either go off next turn or just like really dirt a lot or like draw a march or something like that, or have a tutor for a march. And we whiff extremely hard, just like 4 lands, another Necro, a DI, and no creatures is like we're basically just dead. We're locked out of the game here because we're like for sure going to 3. And they do top deck of Thoughtseize, which like made it even harder for us to like win through this. So we're dead. We don't really have any cards. We're gonna basically, if they hardcast the Phoenix, which they're kind of committed to, they we basically have to like we're gonna go to 3, and then we have to dig twice with Necro and hit a march, and then we're like kind of floating in the game, and then maybe they resolve like a Vein Ripper or something. Um, or I guess they're off Vein Ripper, but like it's still a really bad spot because they're still attacking us with a 3 power creature. But I think keep leaving in the griefs against this kind of deck with reanimate was just it's not a good play, and I think that's probably the mistake that I made was how I sideboarded against this deck that I'm not used to playing against. And so we're gonna see if we hit the march. We have 2 looks, and we end up bricking on the march. So the game's over. Yeah, so I'm happy with my play this match, but I think the sideboarding was could have been better. They immediately concede. So I go to sideboarding. I'm probably not going to sideboard anything. I guess the one read, yeah, no, I don't have any reads on the opponent. I haven't played them in ranked or anything, so I don't know what deck they're on. And they just instant concede the whole match. So we'll take those and go to 1-1 on the qualifier weekend. So we're going into match 3. King Hannes. So versus no companion, with interaction from this grief, I think this hand is a keep. They're probably on combo, but like we just need to draw a black card to grief them at some point before we necro. And we're gonna get Medallion down on 2, so we're gonna be set up really well for a turn 4 off of grief with interaction. So I think this hand's a keep. And they do immediately show a Leyline of Sanctity, which hurts our interaction quite a bit. But I mean, there's no way to blind that I'm going to know that they have a Leyline of Sanctity. But they are on show and tell based off the Undercity Skewers. So we're just going to continue our plan of Medallion into turn 3 Necro. And we do get Thoughtseize here, which sucks. You know, just to like have your grief blanked and then you get your turn 3 Necro Thoughtseize. But you know, they got to have it this time, and that happens. You know, there's not a real way to play around this. I think mulliganing deeper is like a bit irresponsible. Because like if they don't have the Leyline, this hand's like really good. And they also needed the Thoughtseize too to keep us off the turn 3 Necro. And so we're just going to try and maximize the power we have in play here and best it up for a kill somehow if we can. We also have like some Nightmare outs to play through an Atraxa. Maybe. I'm also like if they do combo, I get to see like quite a bit of their deck, and so that's like very important. Because I know some people going into the day were on Hullbreaker, like show and tell control, and they may not play approach, and so like knowing that information is like very valuable. And as you can see, like they have a slower draw because they kept like a hand with Leyline and Thoughtseize. Because like some of them will play like a double Masterminds acquisition win con, some of them will play approach, and then the Hullbreaker Horror list doesn't play any of those cards or any wishes, and they just try and lock you out of the game. So like knowing what they're on is like pretty important. And we are just gonna try and, you know, aggro them out with what we have. Maybe they brick, continue to brick, you know. And again, like even here, if they show like Atraxa and we draw like a Nightmare, we still win through that by just like looping all of our stuff. So it's very important to like keep playing this out. And then if they do combo off, we get to see their win con, which is very big for sideboarding. Yeah. I tend to just make show and tell play it out just to see their cards. You know, if it's like a friendly game, like if someone I know the list they're already on, or like we're just like unranked and I'm in a rush, I won't play it out. But like in competitive Magic, I think it's 100% correct to just make them play it out and let see what more of their list has. If it was open deck list, I would just concede once they show me enough. So they play their wish. So they are on this looks like traditional S&T. I mean, the ley line kind of gives away that they're traditional S&T, but it's good to see. And they actually showed the double mastermind acquisitions win con, which is a bit different than the standard list that have been running around that like Novos puts out. I don't think it's as good. This actually like makes them a bit more vulnerable to surgical extraction post board, and so it is something I'm just going to keep in mind that if I have a stray surgical, it can actually cut off their win cons by removing all the wishes in there that they have access to. And at this point, they've showed the win con, so they have the approach win, so I don't mind conceding. And so we're just gonna do our standard grief sideboard plan or sideboard plan of like bringing in all the discard, removing bowmasters, and like just like being as linear as possible or being as like interactive as possible in like a very like quick way, while also maximizing our outs to like race and combo them. And I don't think might is good because they get priority back when you might in, and they have an omni in play, so they end up getting a spell. They end up just getting too much value against your might, and your might you have to have a spare green mana to like hit the omni, and it's just like really not fast enough or worth it, in my experience. And we do have a turn one necro this game, which is great. And we have like we have 3 of our combo cards already in hand, Jet Medallion being the most important. They open with Leyline again. And it's a 39.9% chance to have a leyline per their mulligan, so it's not a big deal. They're like running a bit hot on leylines, but again, like they might be keeping worse hands that just happen to have leylines. And like even here, like if we draw into discard, it doesn't really feel bad because we can just discard them to hand size off of the necro. And I'm gonna be like going pretty deep here, because we really want to turn 3 them. And we have a medallion in hand, which really helps our odds. And I don't want to go 1 like to 1 though, because the issue is if it's very hard to like have a turn 2, and if you do, it means your hand is like very 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 constrained. And like so if you get Thoughtseize after going to 1, the game can just be over. Like if they take like your only nightmare, or like you end up having to keep like rituals over lands and stuff too, so it's just like pretty tough to do. So I'm just gonna go to 11, so that I have flexibility against their interaction. And we actually do just like rip the full combo here, which is like sweet. We even have the sack outlet off the tower. So and then I calculate a bit here, and I realize that I actually only need, because we have the tower, we only need 1 ritual for the full combo to work. And if they do Thoughtseize us, then we can just draw more cards off Necro next turn and go to 1 that turn, or commit that turn, right? So that's fine. And they're not going to have Beseiju this turn, but they will have Force of Vigor. But they haven't paused in priority, showing to like feel that they have Force of Vigor. So I don't think they're on Force of Vigor at this point. They can't activate Beseiju, and so they can really only have like Thoughtseize here. Yeah, and so again, the lack of pauses with 0 mana would indicate that they either have, or if there was a pause, it indicates that they would either have a Surgical or a Force of Vigor, and they haven't paused at all with priority. So we are just going to go for the full combo here. And this is a turn 2, which is like pretty rare in this deck. And it's pretty lucky for like as like only drawing 9 cards off a Necro. But it's pretty lucky. But I mean, they got to have Leyline into Thoughtseize last game, so that's fine. We get to have it sometimes too. And I'm still glad, like, in case like they happen to actually just have a Surgical or something and can break up the combo, I still am gonna like scry like it'll matter, because it could. And again, like I don't. They could technically on paper have interaction here, so I am still gonna like check my scries, which is like yeah, just an extra thing of caution. It's qualifier weekend. Why not? It's free to do so. And they end up not having interaction here, so we're just gonna have the turn 2 on the play, which is awesome. Really cool to be able to get to do this in an event as big as qualifier weekend. And here I'm actually gonna start stacking my deck. Like Rex Sage is a good card, so I'm just gonna draw it off a Necro and I'm gonna keep scrying just to be thorough. And opponent's just emoting and not conceding, but that's fine. I'll play out the combo. That's fine. I'm gonna speed this up a bit though, because it's pretty redundant. Opponent's just emoting and not conceding, and they give up. Okay, so maybe I won't speed that up because it was quick enough. Same sideboard plan. Yep. So we had a very linear draw game 2 on the play. This hand would be amazing with 1 swamp, but that's life. Even if Phyrexian Tower would have been great. But we're gonna have to mull this on the draw. Yeah, I might have tanked just because the hand is so pretty. But there's, I mean, you just can't keep a 0-lander, even on the draw. I think it's like pretty crazy to do so. But I mean, this hand looks amazing, and I definitely see the temptation. Oh wait, I might, because the thing is, actually no, I'm thinking back. Actually, yeah, because we have the Grief Surgical combo here, right? And so we can actually just kind of win the game without like needing lands because we can Grief for 0 and Surgical for 0. So there was an argument to just like keep it and go for it too, and just like hope if they have show and tell, we just auto win because the traditional list can't really do anything if you surgical show and tell. Like they don't even run Hallowed Fountain to hard cast Atraxa. Okay, and they do have the Leyline again with 7. And we have a lot of interaction in this hand, and we're gonna be able to destroy an Omniscience if they play it out early, which and it would be like which would be great. It's a very interactive keep on our part, but it does buy us a lot of time. And if they like just play out Omni and lose Omni, it's really bad for them. This hand does do poorly against an Atraxa, but I think this is a really like a good enough 6 to go for it, and we have Nightmare to like start looping whatever we draw, and if we like draw a Grief or something, not if we draw a Grief, but like it having the access to Nightmare is like pretty good in our slower hands. In our non-necro hands, it gives us something to do for like most of the game. And we do rip the Necro, which is amazing, right? It's the best top deck we could have. And so actually here we have a count of with 3 lands, a Dork, and a Nightmare in play. We actually have a count of 5 already. And so we also have 2 pieces of protection against the Omniscience. And because like we're on the draw and it's going to be turn 4 next turn, and we know that they've already tutored, if they play Atraxa, like there's no point in going to 8 because if they put out Atraxa into play and we don't have the combo and can't kill them next turn, we can't Necro for anymore because we have to protect against the Atraxa attack anyway. So we just have to go all in to 1 here against Show and Tell in this matchup. So yeah, just like we're only going to get to untap once no matter what they do, with either Atraxa or playing out Omniscience. And they might even beat us with the Omniscience. So I think it's just important to uh, go ahead. Like I think it's important to just jam here and go to one. And like again, if they would have had Thoughtseize, they would have had to like tutor for it preemptively, or they have to like top deck it, right? Because otherwise they would have just casted Thoughtseize last turn. So I think it's just correct to go down to one here. And like worst case, they play out Atraxa. We can put Rexage into play and blow up our own Necro, and that'll give us an extra card draw, right? It's not ideal, but you know it happens. And so we're basically looking for the like maximum. We need 3 combo pieces, and we want resiliency to any discard, or like a force of vigor or something like that. And I think this is a really cool part about the matchup where it's like correct to go down to 1 and just really hard commit on this. And so something I'm also keeping in mind is they're on leyline, but I think like because I'm a base black deck, I like against base black, people tend to side out uh their Borns in favor of Veil of Summer. So that's also something I'm keeping in mind, is that the Rexage effect is probably a bit more powerful than the Vexing Bauble effect. Because Vexing Bauble loses to Veil of Summer and any Abrupt Decays that they bring in, whereas Rexage only loses to Veil of Summer. Or sorry, Rexage only loses to Born of the Wind, which they're likely to side out some copies of. So keeping Rexage is going to be very important in this game. And I'm prioritizing it over Vexing Bauble. We do hit rituals with a tutor, which gives us a lot of resiliency to like losing one piece of our combo. And notably here, because I can only put one permanent into play off a show and tell, there's no reason to keep both a Bauble and a Rexage, as far as I know. So I am just going to commit on the Rexage at this point, so that I can keep my combo pieces in hand. Yeah, and I realize here that I already have a Nightmare in play, so I just want to keep more mana available. I think, or either more mana, or I just want to have like redundancy with the extra tutor somehow. Um, and I think there's a chance that I keep the. I might actually keep the Bauble here too, because it allows me to play through Force of Vigor and um, Surgical, actually. So I can like put Rexage into play, and then I can play out Bauble proactively to protect my combo from their instant speed, from their like free interaction in Surgical and Force of Vigor. So yeah, I think that's what I end up doing. Yeah. And then I also have enough mana to DI for a like replacement effect if I need to, I think. And so I'm assuming they're going to cast Show and Tell here based on just having tutored last turn. Okay, and so if they put Atraxa into play, I get the combo off and win. And if they put Omniscience into play, my Rexage will lose to Born, but my Bauble will lose to Land plus Veil of Summer or Abrupt Decay. So I think they just have more outs to Vexing Bauble. So I'm gonna go with Rexage and commit to this. And this was a recent change over Mindbreak Trap. Or like, you know, it happened like a month or it was one of the latest changes to Jetstorm that I think was really good. And we have a Rexage in play. My opponent doesn't slam Born immediately, which is really good, and they don't have a dig, which is relieving. And again, because the Rex Haze is a trigger, they don't get to cast like an attract. They don't get to put like an Atraxa on the stack or anything, which is really nice. And we are going to get to untap with a count of 8 next turn, which means that we're going to be able to like play through hate, which is really cool. Because we'll have 3 lands plus the tower, which is 5, plus the Dork in play, which is 6, plus Nightmare in play, which is 7, and then plus Medallion in hand, which is 8. So we will be able to like proactively play out Bobble to protect against Force of Vigor and Surgical, which is like all their free interaction that matters. And the Reclamation Stage trigger goes through, and I'm super relieved. Right, we've dealt with it. So now we get to proactively play out our Bobble to protect our combo, and they have no interaction now. You know, anything they would play for 0 mana, which is Force of Vigor or Surgical, gets countered by Bobble. So we're completely safe, and this is deterministic at this point, which is really cool. And so basically, yeah, we're going to get to do a full combo with full protection too, which is great. And we have the extra mana, right? That was really cool to win a game like that, where the Rex Sage would, like, really mattered. Because that is like a one of card choice that was debated for a while. Okay, so we're going into match 4, qualifier weekend, day 1. And we are going to be on the draw. So this hand is actually a turn 2 Necro. We can pitch Grief and activate Tower, play out 2 Dorks, and then we have DI with Ritual for a turn 2 Necro. And we're actually going to have access to 2 Dorks and Tower, and we'll get an extra treasure into play. So this will actually give us like a really good count too. So even if we don't draw a land, this hand is like very, very playable. And my opponent once again opens up with a Leyline, invalidating the Grief interaction, which sucks. And also, they're going to have turn 1 Thoughtseize on the play against us, which also sucks. But it's not the worst. There's an argument for them to take Grief and just kind of like try and screw me a bit, but I do think the DI is a bit more threatening as a whole. But you know, we're just gonna have to go with our plan. We still have to evoke Grief for the mana just to get out our dorks and develop our board. And that way we can at least like work off of the tower that we have, because we are gonna have access to a lot of mana off of this. So again, I think they could take Grief and just like really try and get us and limit us to like Swamp top decks or other Grief top decks. You know, when we only have one other Grief to hit. But I don't mind them taking the tutor here as like a play that you can do. And I do see why the tutor is more scary to them. And like they kind of, I think, maybe want to leave me with the Grief because they have a Leyline in play already, but Grief unlocks a lot of my mana by just like getting to evoke it for 2 mana. And it's a complex decision. I understand why my opponent's like taking quite a bit of time on it. And like I know this deck is not super popular or like not super common in this field. It's mainly like show and tell and energy lists, I believe. 4th Orc here is no good. But you know, we're just gonna commit to our plan of evoking Grief and getting our 2 dorks down, which is gonna give us a count of 4. Interesting, or no, well 6 with the if you include the ritual. So like we do have a lot of mana. So that is like one thing that is good is we're just not really constrained on mana for pretty much the rest of the game at this point. And we are still gonna have tutor and necro top deck outs. So yeah, and like they did fetch shock Thoughtseize on 1, so they're at 15. They just went down to 13 because they shocked again. So like if they kept a slower hand with Thoughtseize and Leyline, like we are gonna get to at least like pressure them to an extent. And like Dark Ritual is like not super helpful just because we already have so much mana. But I am gonna go ahead and just like basically like bank a treasure and get a scry by activating tower and getting another dork into play. And Necro is exactly what we want on top. So yeah, it's good. Didn't need the scry, but it's definitely worth doing because like we have so much mana and we can't really do anything with a third dork anyways. So I think it's good what we did here. We have a count of 8 now, and we are gonna get to Necro, and we're just gonna full on like commit to a Necro. Oh, and actually, yeah, with the treasure, we actually have a count of 9, because it's an additional one, right? So they're gonna tutor, so they're gonna have the combo next turn. We don't really have a way to directly interact with it, but again, like this fits our logic of no matter what, if they have Atraxa, we like we're not gonna get to untap twice anyways, so we should just go to 1 here, and we have plenty of mana to work with. And we even have some non-combo lines versus Atraxa where we can deal enough damage. Like they're gonna fetch and go to 8, where we can deal enough damage to win through an Atraxa potentially, just without fully comboing, which is really cool. And we are gonna keep that medallion on top because it's a very important card for us. And I do make the decision to we need like 3 extra cards here, and I do make the decision to go ahead and ritual, just to save up hand slots because like I think it's kind of a wash between the two, but yeah, it's basically it's like a ritual versus like 1 treasure. And because we have so much mana, it doesn't really make sense to just hold both the rituals. Because like if we actually do get a grief, we would like to put a grief into play off a show and tell. Or actually, no, we wouldn't because they have leyline. But there's really no reason not to go to 1, and like we have enough mana to do everything that we want to do. So we're just gonna commit and go to 15, or go to we're gonna commit and go to 1, and you know, just see if they have the show and tell combo. If they have the full combo, they win. If they have Atraxa, you know, it's we have a very good chance of going off because we have at least 3 pieces with our 2 dorks, 1 in the bin, 1 in play, and a we're for sure drawing the medallion, right? And here I am, open the idea that by top deck of March, there are some scenarios where it makes sense to march my own freebooter to be able to like play around Atraxa if we don't have the full combo. But like we've already drawn the apprentice and the nightmare, and so I know we're gonna have the full combo. And again, even just like off this, 2 from tower, Dwarf can play is 3, 2 treasures is 5 count, ritual is 7 count. And we're gonna get a land for turn, so we're gonna be at 8 count next turn, and then we'll have the medallion as well. So we'll have like guaranteed 9 count next turn. So we're actually gonna be able to like we'll have resiliency to like a Boseiju or something like that because we can afford to. We have enough mana. We have 3 mana over our 6 threshold, and so we could actually just like DI for a missing piece or 2 missing pieces if they get like Thoughtseize or something, which is really good. And you'll see that. So actually, like the game is basically going to end some way or one way or another, either on my opponent's turn or on my turn at this point. And so I actually grab a land over second ritual, which is incorrect because like if you think about it, if the game is only going to last one more turn no matter what, it makes sense to go ahead and grab the ritual because that's going to be worth 2 mana next turn instead of the 1 mana from the land drop next turn. So I think this is just kind of out of like my base heuristics where I just like tend to grab lands. But because the game is ending next turn and we have treasures, it makes sense to go ahead and just grab the ritual over the land drop. And so for that I believe keeping both rituals over land is correct. And because my count is so high, I'm going to be able to have resiliency through a second medallion, keeping that, and then I'm also going to have a DI ritual for like replacement, because DI basically like is rebought by a ritual, so that's also nice. But I believe the correct keep here was instead of the Takanuma, I should have had a second ritual. And again, like because they have Leyline in play, it doesn't even make sense to keep the grief and try and put that into play off of show and tell and try and like disrupt them a little bit. So we basically can't disrupt them at all, and we have to hope they either don't have the full combo with Omniscience, or that they only have the Atraxa combo and we get to untap and kill them. But yeah, if you like look at her hand, it's basically like a bunch of mana, a backup medallion, and a backup tutor for in case like any of our pieces get removed. And so we're gonna put medallion in here because it gives us an extra 2 count to put into play, and then apprentice and nightmare would only give us a +1 count. So it makes sense to go ahead and just jam the medallion down and hope they don't have omni. And they show Atraxa, which is amazing, which means we're gonna like get to untap because they've already played out land for a turn. So once I saw the Atraxa, I was really happy. They actually could have waited, I think, and seen if they had a land drop, and then like Thoughtseize off that land drop. Like hit like a fetch land or a shock land, and then Thoughtseize us. We would have been able to win through that, but like it's a bit loose, I think, by the opponent's end. But this is a really complicated matchup, so I don't blame them for not seeing that. They might also not play this format a lot too. Like I spam this format like an idiot, like a degenerate. So fine. And so we're just gonna go for the full combo here. That's all we have to do. They generally don't have surgical game one, so we're gonna steal this game from show and tell, which is great with only 2 lands on like turn 4, which is sick. And we had backup through a Thoughtseize, which is really cool. Like you can just see by our count here, like we have the extra medallion and the extra DI and ritual in hand. Like we didn't need a lot because our count was so high, and that we got to put medallion. And yeah, like getting to put medallion in play like saves us a lot of mana too. This is my favorite matchup in the format for Jetstorm. I just think it's like really cool race, and then like post board we get a lot of like interesting interaction against them that I really like about and it's like it's just one of those matchups that I really love in Timeless. And we did this against our last show and tell opponent. We're just gonna go with our standard, like grief, show and tell hate plus surgical extraction package, and take out the bowmasters and take out all of our creature removal. Because the way we play around Atraxa, which is their like only creature, is we combo them, right? So we only care about their show and tell like full omniscience combo turns. Otherwise, we're a combo deck. We can play off. We can go through it and play Atraxa. I think like running marches against Atraxa is just kind of like way too reactive and not like not understanding like the power of this deck. That it's a combo deck too. That's like maybe a turn slower than show and tell, but we get a lot more interaction and a lot more like resiliency, and we get to play creatures and attack them when the game slows down. So yeah, no creature removal for this matchup. Okay, so this is your classic. On the draw, you have a 30% to draw a turn 2 Necro, and we also have access to Tower and Nightmare, which is like pretty nice. I think that if this was a 6 or 7, we would probably keep it and pitch a land. But with 7, I do have a bit more room to... And I'm up a game, and I have 7 cards, so I do have a bit more room to mulligan a bit more aggressively. But I think this is like also a justifiable keep if you want to do that. So again, access to Tower and Nightmare in a dork is like really, really nice. Because like even if we like top deck a Grief, it's like pretty nice. Yeah, it's very workable. I wouldn't mind anyone keeping this, and you know maybe you could really justify keeping this, and I think that's completely justifiable. This 6 is better though. I think it's a slightly better. It's a bit worse against discard, but it's a bit more workable. We still have the Nightmare, and it's a guaranteed turn 2 Necro if our opponent doesn't interact with us. So we do draw Grief. So now if our opponent had Thoughtseize, they would probably just cast it on 1 to like play around turn 1 Necros. So I'm not going to Grief just yet because I would also have to pitch our Nightmare, which is a very, very valuable resource with already having a creature and access to a Grief, because like our Nightmare Grief loops are like an additional win con that we have in the deck. So we are going to just, we're going to wait a turn on the Grief because 1, because Nightmare is so valuable, and 2, because they can't go off this turn. Unless they have like exactly Dark Ritual Show and Tell, but like I usually post board they're not playing as many Dark Rituals. If they're playing them at all. And maybe, you know, they're cutting Dark Ritual for Leyline, I'm not sure. I do just rip the Necro, which changes things a bit. We get to like we can basically, the DI is freed up now, which is really nice. And so that also means that we could just pitch the DI to Grief, right? I think I'm pitching, like I think Nightmare selected, but I think I would end up pitching DI. Because yeah, just access to Nightmare with Grief is like more valuable. Yeah, so I guess what I'm thinking through the trade-off here is Nightmare is really valuable with the Grief, but then having access to DI means that if we hit their Surgical, we can just or sorry, if we hit Show and Tell, we can actually just go for game and DI sacrifice Greedy Freebooter to DI, Surgical their Show and Tell, take all the Show and Tells out of their deck, and basically like they're stuck, and then play out our Necro and be Necroing and like just be really aggressive. So they do have Show and Tell, but the issue is they have a Surgical for protection against their Show and Tell. So if we try and go all in, you know, we DI and we go all in on like Surgicaling their Show and Tell, they can Surgical their own Show and Tell in response and prevent that from happening. So we're going to be trying to like, we're going to get our Necro down, obviously, but we are going to be playing this kind of cat and mouse game of if they ever Surgical for, if they ever Surgical their own, sorry, if they ever try and Surgical us, we can just Surgical their Show and Tell in response, as long as they don't have a fetch available to get a Mystic Sanctuary, or they don't have Dig Through Time up to delve it away and fizzle our Show and Tell. And so we have a count of 3, and they're like very far away from comboing. So I'm just gonna go to 10 here, and you know, and so that way we have a bit more of a, we can just develop our board a bit more before going for a bigger Necro, and we'll get a lot more hand selection that way too, by being able to like play out our board a bit and then draw more cards off Necro. So we've Necroed for 10. Also, notably, I make a mistake here is I've been full controlling Necro. Against Surgical, you actually want to tap Necro once at a time. So that way, if they like, if I put all my 10 Necro triggers on the stack and then they Surgical like Dark Ritual, it means I can never draw Dark Rituals. But if I do them one at a time, it means that I can like, basically I can like do it in response to Surgical and play around Surgical like a lot more frequently if I want to draw Dark Rituals. And that was from Non, who's like probably the highest ranked. Yeah, he's the highest ranked Jetstorm player. He just camps like top 30, top 10. And we do like whiff on lands completely, which kind of sucks for developing out our board and our combo. But and again, something that's interesting here is like we did draw the surgical, which is really good. So that means we don't have to tutor for it. And then because we know they're on surgical, but because they have a show and tell exposed, we can actually expose our combo to surgical if we want. One, because it's like it kind of does bait them a bit into trying to surgical our combo, and then we can just surgical show and tell, and it hurts them way worse because they don't play any creatures that they can cast, right? Versus yeah, so like we because we have a surgical in hand, we can be we're pretty free to discard whatever you want, and if they surgical something, we get them in surgical their show and tell, and it's a lot worse on them. So we're not worried about randomly discarding a piece of our combo that might get surgical. And like Marionette Apprentice just is a bit too slow here with only access to 2 lands, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Yeah, and again, so like the idea of this like surgical cat and mouse game is if we ever surgical show and tell, the game's like kind of over. Whereas if they surgical our combo, we can still win as long as they're also disrupted. So our surgical ends up being like more powerful than theirs. At least in this game state, right? But now what's happening is they have 5 cards in bin and 3 mana up, so they can actually use dig through time to protect their surgical or protect their show and tell if we ever try and surgical it, right? So surgical ends up playing a lot worse now because they have access to dig through time. And so here I'm actually going to cast Duress to try and force out my opponent's dig through time. Because that is like a way that they're protecting their show and tell, right? And again, with like 2 discard, with like this Duress available, I'm just not in a super rush to combo. Cutting them off their combos and going to end up doing more than their combo. And they do surgical to grief, which means they're no longer off of protecting their show and tell with surgical, but they are now protecting their show and tells with dig through time. And also, like, if you look at my hand, I don't have a clear way to finish the game quickly. So I am kind of understanding that, look, I'm interacting with my opponent quite a bit, and they're interacting with me quite a bit. I'm going to be able to put creatures into play and start, like, killing them. But this game is not going to end in the next, like, turn or two. It might go, like, pretty long. And they showed 2 digs and a symbol, right? And so the correct clip play could be taking a symbol here and and just saying that the second dig through time is going to be stranded after they cast the first one. But I do think like knowing that the game is going to go a bit longer, I don't want them to build up resources to combo, and like they can't cast both dig and a symbol on the same turn, and then they can't like the issue with dig is it gets them 2 cards, and they need 2 cards to get their combo. So I think I end up going with taking the second dig because I do think the game is going to go on like pretty long. And so I want to like I just want to prepare for a long game this game because I just I'm so far from comboing and my opponent is so far from comboing. So I don't mind just kind of cutting off their way to like accrue cards, right? Because they're also going to be able to dig and then like leave their show and tell in the bin if they want. But the issue is if they do that, we get to surgical them. And so they can't try and get it back with Mystic Sanctuary or something because we're still threatening the surgical. And like I am going to go to 3 here, I think, so that I can hold up surgical and really pressure them into exposing their show and tell. Okay, actually, no, I made the decision that I've decided that I think in the moment I decided that surgical is just dead. Because like they've clearly played around it very well, and so I'm just gonna pitch the surgical at this point. I think it's like kind of fulfilled its role in the game. Um, yeah, and we're gonna commit all in on the combo because again they don't have any reach, and you know this game's gonna slow down. They're gonna have to cast a dig. It's really hard for them to rip the full combo off a dig and then go off. So we're just gonna pitch some of our interaction and kind of focus on getting to them. And I guess it is possible that we keep the second surgical maybe, but again like we just really want to keep the game slow here if we can. And because like we basically had a count with the medallion in hand, we had a count of 5 with 2 lands, 2 dorks, and a medallion. So again, I think it makes sense to go to 1 here and commit and try and close out the game before they can. I don't think they're gonna combo next turn, but they could combo the turn after that if they get a good dig. Because like they only have to hit like one of Omni, Atraxa, and Show and Tell, and then they can assemble for the next turn. And again, because they know I have the surgical, I do think our surgical gets a lot worse. There's an argument you could like, you know, like metagame it a bit and like pitch 1 surgical and then have the second surgical available, but I don't, I just don't think that's where the game is going at this point. And like even here, they dig through time away their Show and Tell. It's possible they're supposed to leave it, but I'm not sure. I think it does expose a lot. Because there could also be this idea that if I put away 2 surgicals, I might just have a third surgical in hand, right? They might not know my list completely. And so this is kind of a really funny keep because they know I have the Rex Age and the Vexing Bauble in hand, right? And so it's with the amount of resources they have with like dig through time, they're not going to be able to play around both effects, right? And so I read my opponent cast, and then also so that my opponent just cantripped with Veil, and I'm reading this as their dig was not very good because you know if they had the full combo, they would just save the Veil to be able to play through Vexing Bauble. But because of this, it looks a bit desperate, I think, on their end, and so I'm assuming they didn't have the full combo, and they kind of bricked a little bit. My opponent holding up 3 mana here is weird. I read this as either they're holding up a Boseiju or like a full like Force of Vigor. And here I do have a count of 9 with 4 from my lands, 2 for my dorks, and then Ritual and Medallion in hand. And I do need a tutor for an apprentice, so it effectively gives me a count of 8. So I have 2 mana to play around with, and I'm going to use that extra 2 mana to get Bauble into play to play around Force of Vigor. Because I have I essentially only need 6, and I have a count of 9, and I have a tutor which puts me to 8, and gives me 2 extra mana, and then so that one of the 2 extra mana is going to Bauble, and I'll have an extra mana left over. But so now they can only have Boseiju. And also, so something with my sequencing here is too. Actually, no, it doesn't matter for Boseiju because I didn't have a Blooming Marsh. But if I had a Blooming Marsh, you want to play that after they Boseiju your stuff, or you want to play it before they Boseiju your stuff so that it comes into play untapped. And we are just going to go for the full combo here. And we're gonna get our Marionette Apprentice. And we do have access to the full combo now, and they cannot Force a Vigor or Surgical S now, right? So they can only have like Boseiju or yeah, it's like mainly Boseiju. is what I'm thinking. It's like only Beseiju, and if they have Beseiju, they have Beseiju, and it's like not that big of a deal because they will take like, you know, they won't take a damage, but it's not that great for them, and it does put them off the combo a bit, and it means they only have like an Assemble and another card in hand. So they're not likely to kill us the next turn too. And my opponent cast Crush Grip, which is like really surprising. I think the card's like a bit too reactive in this matchup, and it's like better fit for show and tell mirrors. But in this specific spot, it does end up being like pretty good. It necro locks us, and I think this is a good play by opponent, and it kind of puts some pressure on us to like commit to like killing them, right? Like we can't draw any cards for the rest of the game outside of the cracking the bauble, and we could maybe Rek'Sage our own necropotence, but yeah, we got to close out the game now. We're kind of in a rush to win because our opponent's going to draw cards for the rest of the game, and it doesn't look like we are. Okay, and they do a symbol, and so I'm gonna have very low resources for the rest of the game, right? It's like, I have access to Bauble, and then I could maybe crack my Necro with Rek'Sage to unlock my draws. But like to cast Rek'Sage, I'm gonna have to sack my Freebooter. And here I'm actually while my opponent is like tutoring and stuff, I am calculating if I Rek'Sage my own medallion next turn after attacking, if it will increase my clock at all and like save me a turn of clocking my opponent. And so I'm gonna go ahead and get my attacks in. And so the line would be like sacrifice. Calculating it out is, so if I sack a dork, use a treasure to cast Rek'Sage and target my own medallion, it would put them at 4, right? Because the treasure, the dork, and the medallion triggering off of Apprentice. And then I could attack next turn for 3 damage, which would put them to 1. And then I could sack Bauble and I could sack Rek'Sage, and my opponent would be at -1, right? So the extra ping from killing my medallion is not going to matter, is how it works, right? So because of that, I'm not going to target my own medallion because it doesn't change my clock by a turn. So with that being the case, I am just going to put the Rek'Sage into play and kill my own Necropotence. Again, this is because like I can't. They know I have the Rek'Sage. I know my opponent is kind of digging towards their full combo, and like I can't draw cards. So like I kind of just have to jam here and hope my opponent doesn't like immediately have the combo. But again, here I did calculate whether or not Rek'Saging my own medallion gave me the damage for lethal next turn, and it's overkill. So I'm not going to do it. So I'm just gonna get my hit my own Necros to unlock my draw steps and like prevent myself from being Necro locked, right? And so like this would give us like, if they got an Atraxa into play like next, so by unlocking our top decks, right? If they put like Atraxa into play, that means that like we could still have our top decks to like if we top deck a Nightmare, we could still be able to kill them through Necropotence. Or sorry, so if we like top deck, if they play Atraxa off show and tell like next turn, we would be able to have top decks of like Marionette Apprentice or Nightmare and still be able to like kill them through Atraxa, which is really big. So that's why we're Rek'Saging our own Necro. Because like if we had it's important to like at least free up those outs, and we do still have the Bauble in play to take them off of Omniscience. And if they do Omniscience, they have to have like a payoff and an anti-hate card, right? Which is like really hard to do with like how low resource this game has been. So feeling pretty safe. I'm actually more afraid of an Atraxa here because it's just easier for them to have show and tell plus Atraxa versus like show and tell, Omniscience, payoff, anti-hate card like Abrupt Decay or Veil. So yeah, I mean if they play Atraxa, we have like exactly Apprentice and exactly Apprentice. Maybe no, yeah, exactly Apprentice and Nightmare outs. And they do Corrosion Grip, our other Bauble, which is fine. Because we were gonna sack that anyways, but yeah, they have to, yeah. And we're rewarded by a tight play of destroying our own Necro by drawing a Swamp. But this is our clock, right? And we have lethal this turn, which is great. And we get to sack our Rex Sage to tower. So like it was really important to play out this Rex Sage because it meaningfully changed our clock by 1 turn by playing Rex Sage out instead of the attacking with the Dork, right? So again, we're rewarded by a tight play, and we get a really like neat interactive game against Show and Tell, which I haven't been able to get a good footage of on this channel. And so it's like really cool to see a game play out like this, where you have some really like tight, important decisions, and they end up really mattering, and you get a non-combo win against a tier 1 deck, right? Okay, we're going into match 5. Currently 3-1 on the weekend. Day 1. Turn 1 Necro here is sweet. We go Ritual, Ritual, DT for Necro. Love it. And our opponent does mulligan to 5, which is nice. So we're going to commit to our turn 1 Necro. You know, there's no other really good play that we can do. And I end up drawing 5 here off Necro because we already have like a good medallion play for turn 2. And I'm not sure what my opponent's on. But yeah, and I think that's fine. Because we're just trying to, we don't have a clear like turn 2 option available, but we can set up really well for turn 3. And we do miss out on land for 5 draws, which like kind of sucks. And it's about 11% to happen based on the hyper geo that I did. But it's possible we're supposed to dig more in the dark, but I'm not completely sure. Because, you know, just like missing lands is really not good. But we do at least get a ritual, so we're able to build our count to 5, even though we only have 1 land available. So we'll have, you know, we'll get a dork and a medallion down. So land is 1 count, dork in play is 2 count, and then a medallion in play is 3 count. So we have a count of 5, so which meets our prerequisite to go off and go for big necro is 4. And because they're mystery reinforced, I know it's show and tell, and or I'm gonna assume it's show and tell, and they didn't Thoughtseize us turn 1, so they're not gonna have any interaction for us outside of top deck Thoughtseize and Beseju. So we are just gonna go to 1 here because we have the count required to. We're on the play. They're not gonna have a lot of interaction available. We go for it here. And like March is not gonna be important in this matchup, so I'm not really looking at it too much. And so here we're basically because we're basically gonna go to like we want resiliency with our pieces. We want the full combo kill first, and then we want to start looking at resiliency with our pieces. So with a count of 5, the Phyrexian Tower alone gives us a count of 7, which is really good because that means we can have a backup tutor if they like blow up a nightmare or something, right? Or like you know, if they just Thoughtseize us next turn, we can just, you know, backup tutors are really helpful in this matchup. And like Beseju doesn't really hurt your count that much because of you know, you get a land back, so like the backup tutors like end up being like really good here. And so I end up keeping the full combo. Notably, the Phyrexian Tower is really good because we're getting 2 count and a sack outlet to put a dork in the bin. And then I'm going to keep a backup Nightmare and backup tutors. And I think most show and tell lists only run 0 or 1 Besagus, so we're like pretty insulated too. Like this is it's pretty hard for them to disrupt it outside of the one of Besaju or if they have like Thoughtseize in the main. So we have a count of 5. We're gonna go up to a count of 7. And again, if I had like a I would keep over DI. If I had like a backup medallion, I would keep the medallion over backup DI. And if I had to choose between like extra nightmare or extra medallion, I'd keep extra medallion. Because that just like it makes your tutors cheaper and stuff like that. It's always cheaper to tutor with medallion out than with without medallion, right? So here my opponent is hovering over my combo pieces and necropotence. So we're just kind of waiting to see what they do. Like if they besage you my medallion, it's annoying, but it's not. The game's not over, right? And they are spending a full turn doing it, meaning that they're not getting additional card selection by like assembling or something like that. But they do need to interact with me this turn because we're threatening the combo kill next turn. Okay, and my opponent besages my Necro, which is a very big punt because one, they need to hit the medallion if anything, and two, like I'm already Necro locked. Like I don't have 0 life. I know, like I get that Necropotence is scary and it's a powerful card, but Necro is actually like a really bad card in that board state because I already have 1 life. So unless they think I have a way to gain life or something, I really think that they should have besaged my medallion or like waited for me to show my combo and then besaged either the medallion or the nightmare. Ideally, the medallion, I think. Um, it's a bit weird in that like besaging the like if you take me off medallion and I don't have a backup, I can still kind of cook a little bit with nightmare. Versus if they get my nightmare and I don't have a backup, I can't really do anything with medallion. So there's like a valid argument for either of them. Um, yeah. And I think with how slow their draw is, I think they would actually want to hit the nightmare if anything, because like we still threaten a lot of pressure with just the nightmare plus dorks and an apprentice, right? And so we are just gonna have the full combo here and you know get a win. Game 3 on the play against Show and Tell again. And I did chew into a lot of Show and Tell this weekend, but I think that was kind of expected. I think going into this weekend in general, I kind of like did some testing with like really strong energy players, and I kind of realized that the energy matchup is pretty difficult for this deck, but I really like the show and tell matchup for this deck. So I was pretty happy with queuing in the show and tell as much as I did. Again, this is you've seen this enough times at this point. Removal goes out, Bowmasters go out. Uh, all of our discard and surgical and show and tell hate comes in. Okay, so going into game 2 against our show and tell opponent. Notably, they weren't on ley lines, but I'm still bringing in my full package against ley line decks anyways, because you can always just discard it to Necro. So against show and tell specifically, I don't mind keeping my Grief Surgical hands because it gives me the chance to just immediately lock them out of the game if I hit show and tell and win the game. Yeah. But this hand does die to if they leave up a veil. So they don't do that, but yeah, they end up having turn 1 Thoughtseize, which is fine too. And we draw Necro, which is really nice. Yeah. And so here we are actually going to play out our Nightmare just to develop our count from 2 to 3. We don't really have anything else productive to do, so we might as well do it. And we're pretty committed to Necroing next turn anyways. I can't really think, like, I think the only draw maybe I could think of is if they tap out and we top deck like a Grief or a Duress, right? And then you have an argument to do it. They don't have a play on 2 or or 3, like, or they don't, cast a 2 to or show and tell immediately, which is like a bit weird, I think. But generally the stock show and tell does not have any counter magic, especially post board. I can really imagine it, so I'm not going to worry about it. But they do have the mana drain. Yeah, which is like pretty surprising, but it's not something I'm going to play around uh, without like having known their list. Like they really just look like stock show and tell last game. So we just don't really have a lot going on at this point. But we like seeing how they boarded is also like very important. And they do surveil. And because knowing that they kept the card on top, I'm assuming it's either a combo piece or a card that will help them win the game. Like this, like either this turn or the next turn. And so because I'm pretty behind and I want to see how they sideboarded, uh, and because they topped on their surveil, I am going to go ahead and surgical just to like see how they boarded and mess up their surveil. And so here I'm like I actually on paper I'm going through their deck and I'm writing down any kind of important interaction that's like meaningful for game 3. So I noticed that they're on 1 Abrupt Decay, 1 Force of Vigor, 2 Mana Drains, like total, 2 Spell Snare, 1 Surgical, 2 Thoughtseize, 1 Veil Summer, 1 Boseiju, and notably 0 Borns. And so if they board the exact same way next game, which I presume they will, now I know my Rex Sage is always going to be good against their Omniscience. And so this is like very, very important information for game 3. And I also know that my Bauble is going to be pretty good with only one Veil and one Abrupt Decay. So they've like brought in like a lot of counter spells and like some amount of discard and surgicals and stuff. But I know that my anti-hate against their Omniscience turns are going to be really good. So it's really helpful to know. And then like I think on the surgical, you do end up seeing that they had an assemble the team on top, which is it could have helped them win the game or like develop their board, right? And so I talk Anuma, and it's important that I take the Grief and not the Apprentice, so that I can loop back into my Apprentice with my Grief, and then and like basically develop the energy to get back, start doing Grief loops. And so, I take this. The Spell Snare is more important. They already have enough payoffs, and I need to protect my Nightmare at this point because that's how I'm gonna keep my opponent locked out of the game. If my strategy is to work. and there's no reason to expose my like knowing the suite that they have. They actually have like more counterspell, like they have more Thoughtseize and stuff like that. And I want to get my attack in with Grief, so I'm gonna. I didn't Nightmare last turn. I'm gonna do it this turn. And I drew Ghast, which is a better thing to loop. Like it gives me additional loops with Apprentice and whatnot, so that'll be good. And so now I'm gonna execute my plan of looping Nightmare to loop Griefs. Sorry, I'm gonna execute my plan of looping Nightmare to loop Grief. And then at this point, I'm actually gonna be able to win through an Atraxa resolving, so I can lead on taking the Omniscience first. And we're gonna go ahead and get our Grief in the bin and start like forcing action here. And you know, like if they have nothing, like we just get to we get to take the Omniscience, and even if they show and tell Atraxa in the play, we still went through that. And so this is kind of the power of like just having access to Grief post board, especially against like show and tell and other combo decks. So we loop our Grief, and they actually draw the one of Veil Summer, which sucks, you know. So we basically have to dodge whatever they drew off Veil and whatever they drew off of they're gonna draw off their top deck, right? And they end up top decking Demonic Tutor. Um, so they they hit their outs on 2 draws, and so they're gonna get a tutor for show and tell, and they're gonna be able to win the game. Yeah, that happens sometimes, but I think we play this game well and minimize the outs that they have. And like we also like even just getting that surgical off to like mess up a surveil. Even though it was low value, it messed up their surveil, and then it also really gave us a lot of information that we can use for game 3. Because like knowing there's generally like a big cat and mouse game of knowing what people are like bringing in and how S&T like show and tell is like adjusting their numbers post board for like anti hate. And so we got like just knowing that information going into game 3 is really nice in terms of deciding what to play around and like what's the probability that our opponent has those cards. And like again, just knowing that our Rex Sage is always going to be good is like very very big for us. Okay, and here we are going to concede with Surgical on the stack because I don't want them to know. They might not know that I have Rex Sage. I don't want them to know what my list is going into game 3. So we're going to go ahead and concede and wrap it up. They clearly have enough to work with to finish the game and win. Okay, so we're going into game 3 against Show and Tell. We can't keep this. Uh, can't keep this either. We don't have any workable lands or Grief or anything. With the Grief, this hand's a great keep. And this is a nuts opener. This is basically like the best start that you can have with like 7 cards. It's like double ritual into Necro Medallion. We get to do it on a mold of 5. Versus no interaction, we could actually just go for like fully commit to a turn 2 here. But given that they do have like Thoughtseize, they do have like Spell Snare and stuff like that. I think it makes sense to just try and develop our board a bit more, and develop for like Necker for a good amount, and then set up for a turn 3 that's a lot more resilient than an all-in turn 2. And again, like we're on the play, and yeah, we might as well just like build up some resources and like just not randomly die to like a Thoughtseize or like a Force of Vigor or something like that. Like in spots like this, it doesn't really matter. If you necro to like 10 or like 9, it doesn't matter too much. And so here we actually end up hitting like quite a few lands, which sucks. But so I am actually going to keep the Necro here just to as a way to pitch it to Grief, and because like the rest of our hand is so bad. And this is also the thing, like when going for a turn 2, like we could still like completely brick. You know, and again, like because we're on the play and it's against show and tell, we're just like we're not under a lot of pressure to like go for a turn 2 on the play. It's turn 3 is kind of where we want to be at, especially like post board. And like even here, like we don't have the combo, but like we can grief them and kind of like interact with them a bit and kind of force some action. And so this is going to be kind of a neat grief decision against opponent. I really liked the decision that came into play. So they're going to have show and tell attracts a spell snare. And so we're actually just like against how fast our start is, we're not really concerned with them show and telling attracts into play. And we're very, 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 very likely to have a turn 3. We're like very well set up for it. So I think it actually makes sense to take the spell snare here, take their interaction, strip them of that, and just kind of force them on this like much slower plan of a turn 3 on the draw Atraxa. In which case, like we basically like have up until turn 4 to kill them, right? So I think it is correct here to take the spell snare over show and tell, which like I know it makes you scream a little bit, but like, hey, we're a combo deck. We have an amazing start. We're on the play. I think it makes sense to go under them with taking spell snare here. And so I'm going to do something that's like super important in these like very linear matchups where you're racing a ton. Is I'm going to activate Necro first, go down to 2 life, then Diabolic Intent, and then scry off the Death Trigger off Freebooter, then draw another card off a Necro, and then Diabolic Intent to kind of like fill in the missing card. And so this is something that like really matters when you're trying to race and like fully utilize your mana each turn against a combo deck. And so we're going to have a count of 3, 6, 7 with the medallion, the 2 lands, and the treasure. And here I noticed that I have I didn't hit a nightmare and I didn't hit an apprentice off of all my necros. So, and then because I know I'm going to get a DI, I think getting the marionette down is more important because it's going to give me bodies to use for that DI, right? And we're actually not going to have any other tutors in hand either, so we're just going to have the DI that we scried to the top and got. So I'm going to go ahead and develop out my apprentice, which gives us a count of 8 for the turn. And then knowing that we'll need a tutor for Nightmare, we'll basically have a count of 7 next turn. But we are going to get a land drop, which will put so we're going to basically have like effectively a count of 8 next turn, and we're going to have because we're going to hit a land drop, right? And so we're actually going to have like 2 mana to play with. One's going to be used on a tutor, so we can actually so it's 7, and so we actually have 1 extra mana that we can use for a Vexing Bauble to play that out proactively and have hate, just to prevent against their like show and tell. This will cut off basically like their show and tell into Omniscience draws, which are what we're more afraid of given how fast we're going, and you know like yeah. So I think getting the Vexing Bauble down is important. It also frees up a hand slot, but it'll protect us from Force of Vigor and Surgical, which is really nice. Again, so we are going to keep the backup medallion here, just in case they like Besage you it. And they don't have Besage you, and they don't have Veil Up, notably. And because we have a Vexing Bauble down, they're off of Force of Vigor, and they could technically have Surgical for 1 black mana. And so for here, because I'm Necrolocked and I don't have a clean way to play around Surgical Extraction if my opponent has it, I actually think it's a better play to just go ahead and grief him. Also because I know I'm gonna hit their show and tell, right? And so if they top deck surgical, we could actually be in a hairy spot by like going for the full combo because they can show and tell next turn. And we actually like don't have a way to like rebuild at all, which would really suck. Like we only have like one dork in bin, one dork in hand. We have no other way to access dorks. So I think it is the correct play to not go for the full combo, even though we have access to it. We're gonna play around surgical by going ahead and hard casting grief. And we're gonna hard cast grief with the intent to take their the show and tell, and then cast surgical for 1 black, because we can't cast it for free because we only have 1 life and there's a bobble in play. So we're gonna try and just take their show and tell and then surgical it to lock them out of the game. And they drew another show and tell, and so I think in retrospect, like so like my heuristic has always been to just like kill the show and tell as much as possible when you know it, like surgical show and tell whenever you know it's good and can't be like disrupted or anything. I think in like there's like a very small benefit to draw stepping it in case they draw the surgical, or sorry, in case they draw their show like a third show and tell and you get to lock them out of the draw step. But I know they have no way to hard cast Atraxa in like a reasonable amount of time, and I think in retrospect they like they didn't have a dig through time set up to like cast it in response and protect it, and they would have had to top deck surgical to protect themselves in their draw step, and they would have had to hard cast it for 1 mana, which would have like cut them off of like their own like because the bobble's in place, so they would have had to like cast surgical for 1 mana, and that would have cut them off show and tell mana. And so we technically could have like draw step surgical, but if you want like the tightest, most optimal play, but again like it's a very long day. It's a very like tight decision, and I know it's like there's just not a lot of upside to like waiting, and just to, like kind of save some mental calculation and like maybe prevent some mistakes. I went ahead and and just like surgical the show and tell at sorcery speed. And again, like they could have top deck mana drain and like blocked it that way, and then that also would have cut them off show and tell, and we would have full comboed them out. But like again, this is a lot of calculation for like a very like small edge that it's just very this deck is hard enough to play on its own. And so we use surgical at sorcery speed. We have the full combo and show it, they win, and the opponent gives up, right? They know they're locked out of the game. So it was enough. I think the heuristic was good there. It wasn't like the quote unquote like tightest play, but it takes a lot of calculation, I think, to like get to like a slightly more optimal play, and it just like it's very very marginal and very very exhausting to play a full tournament day like that. So the heuristic that I developed during testing was good enough, and we go to 4-1, which is nice. Okay, going into match 6. And I don't know who this player is. I don't have any past history with this player. And now with my opponent having no companion, and I think this actually is a keep, like a very clear keep too. I have a very clear plan to disrupt them multiple times with Grief and Nightmare, and I'm going to be able to actually loop starting turn 2 with my Nightmare with like Marionette Apprentice and Grief. I think the big question here is whether or not I should exile Dark Ritual number 2 or Orcish Bowmasters. I think in hindsight, I actually like exiling Dark Ritual number 2 over Bowmasters, but I think in this game I actually end up deciding to exile Bowmasters. But I think the tighter play was to exile Dark Ritual. And this is a really good question for Non if he ends up watching this video. He tends to keep a lot more of these hands than I do, and so I am kind of interested in like what his thought process would be. But I think in hindsight, I would like to see me exile the second Dark Ritual here and not the Orcish Bowmasters. I think considering exiling any other card is crazy and yeah, not really worthwhile. Because the issue is like there's not really an issue with only keeping the Marionette Apprentice. It's just like my clock is not that fast, and I can only really like it makes my reanimates like a bit like I just can't generate too many bodies, which like kind of matters for clock purposes and stuff like that on the fair game. And I see that they're on a Soren Scam here, and so I'm going to continue my plan of looping Griefs, and it's really important to take them off the grief here so that I can protect my Sithonian Nightmare. Yeah. So we're gonna stay on plan. Our grief is in the bin. We have access to Nightmare next turn, and we're gonna be able to loop grief starting next turn and just take them out of the game. You always get your attacks in, right? And we have nothing really to do besides start looping this grief and getting under them, right? And our hand's actually really good against what they have because the Sorns really need a lot of synergy with the Lindas, right? So if we can just keep them off of Linda, like we make both of their Sorns dead, which is like really great. And there's also like a small decision here of binning Apprentice or the Servo. If you sacrifice the Apprentice, you can start like kind of like building out your servos a bit more. Versus like the immediate like sack damage from Apprentice and getting pressure that way. But I think either are fine. Actually, no, because yeah, you're gonna have to sack to tower anyways because we don't have access to any black pips on our own, so that's fine. I think going for servo is correct. And they actually do top deck a grief here, which like that and like Juggernaut Peddlers are like some of their better draws, and so they're gonna be able to take us off a Nightmare, which really sucks. But like they only have 2 swords in hand, right? So it's not the worst. We're still like ahead on board, and like they still have to like kind of draw against us. And we top deck a Phyrexian Tower, which is like again one of the worst draws in our deck. Like getting towers in multiples like this with no other lands sucks. But we just got to go with it. You know, qualifier weekend, we're drawing double Phyrexian Tower, but that happens. You know, and we got to play through it. And this is like one of those like I didn't have a lot of matchup experience versus Swords game. Like I pretty much went undefeated against it on ladder, I think, or something close to that. And so a lot of my prep was against the big three with Demir Tempo, Mardu, and show and tell. And so I actually like going in, I didn't have a lot of like really thorough testing against uh Phoenix Scam and Soren Scam. So a bit of a miss like on the meta call for how much Soren Scam was going to be in the qualifier weekend, but yeah, I mean I think it's an interesting matchup. I think I could have maybe spent some more time on it than I did. And it kind of makes sense because it's a very like high floor deck to play that can also high roll. That's like very like straightforward for someone that's not familiar with the format. This is not me saying the deck is easy. I think it's just like you have very like you have some straightforward plays to make. And we do top deck a Nightmare, which is interesting. And we are going to be able to like get more damage in, which is good. And we don't have to worry about this like awful scenario, right, where we like sack our creature to generate mana for a Nightmare, and then they like remove our other creature, right, because we know that our opponent, or we know our entire opponent's hand at this point. And there's not really any value in like rebuilding an apprentice with a servo because like the grief is a really good body on this board. They're gonna have to fetch and go to 4, right? So like there's no real reason to go for a Nightmare this turn. But like having access to our Nightmare is really nice. And they did just hard cast a Sorin here. And you know, but that's okay, right? As long as they don't have the LN to follow up, like it's like we're close to parity, right? We're gonna be able to deal 4 per turn versus their 3 per turn lifelink. And let's see, we do top deck of Bowmasters, which is really good. And it means we're gonna be able to find lethal with room to spare, which is really cool. This is a really nice line that I probably my favorite line from the weekend. You know, just you know, we have 3 Phyrexian towers and no actual swamps in play. Um, and yeah, we're just gonna sack Grief, ping him with Bowmasters, and use tower again, and have Nightmare available, and we just have a lot of random ping off the top of a top deck Bowmasters, which is um always neat to see. We could have done way more damage than we did this game. And yeah, we get game 1 against Sorntail, which is always sick, and we did it with a, you know, just very cool 1 tower hand, and stayed on 1 tower for the entire game. And I think it kind of shows that yeah, that was a good keep, I think, against no companion, and that yeah, I didn't even need to like top deck a land to justify the keep, right? There was enough material there to make the game work. And for sideboarding versus Sorntail, I really don't like leaving in the griefs, because they can be reanimated, right? And it just like breaks this parity of like grief or like or grief evokes. And I didn't really do any testing for Sorntail besides laddering, like I said. So there's also this issue of there not being like a stock Sorntail list like there are for like with the big 3. You kind of have like chest hair on Tempo, Novos on Show and Tell, and Kure on Mardu. And so you know there's 75 pretty much from the jump. But with Sorntail, there wasn't a unified list going around, and so everyone kind of had a slightly different variation. Some were on like Juggernaut Peddlers, some were on Solitude, some were not, and it kind of made sideboarding a bit trickier too. I just knew I wanted the Griefs out. Surgicals for their reanimates, but this is the shell I went with. I don't know how correct it is or isn't. I know against like Grief Scam, you tend to want your medallions a lot less because like Nightmare on its own is a lot better than Medallion on its own. It's the logic, and you can end up getting in these low resource games if they Grief Scam you. Okay, always happy with the turn 1 Necro. You know, sometimes you keep 1 tower hands and have to cook off of it. Sometimes you just have turn 1 Necro. And we even have a March, or is it not gonna have March, but yeah, and they play Surveil land turn 1, so as long as they don't evoke Grifa, so like I'm as happy as a clamp here. And it's a great spot to be in, you know. Game 2 in, you know, in a match on qualifier weekend, and it looks like I'm gonna get to get my turn 1 Necro in. We even top deck a March next turn, so like we don't even have to like build out a huge board, because like they didn't evoke Grief, so like unless they have Thoughtseize and untap and play it, our March is just gonna be able to provide us a lot of card selection and really just like help us kind of steamroll this game, which is really nice. March is just a very scary card if they this early in the game, especially if you're turn 1 Necros. Uh, just in terms of like it lets me dig to 1 life basically, and then I can kill a creature. And again, we only had a count on 1 with our Necro, so like we can't combo off anyways. And I know they're playing a lot of discard, right? With showing Juggernaut Peddler game 1. And here, so because I'm going to have to be able to cast March on my opponent's turn, I just go up to hand size here, and my plan is to March the Grief that I think they have. I'm not 100% sure, but basically, I'm just like they can also have Alinda too, and I want to be able to hit Alinda and kill it uh before they can get the Alinda life gain trigger. And so I'm just kind of trying to like maximize the black cards I have in hand a bit, while also like kind of being open to their hate. I know they play, some of them play like Disruptor Flute, some of them play Needle. Again, just without the unified sideboard, it's really hard to know exactly what they might have. But I do make the decision to just like maximize the amount of black cards in my hand, for like an Alinda that comes down. Because like again, Alinda is not a big issue if it comes down and it doesn't make the 4/4 off that, because then you just have to deal with the 3/2, right? And that's like in the Sorin at 1, and it's not like too bad. Okay, and they don't even have the Alinda, which is really great for us. And we even just are able to get a Bowmasters down and get some pressure into play. And I'm not prioritizing like hitting the Sorin down too much, because I know that they don't have an Alinda to go with it right now, so it'd have to be top decked. And at this point, I do think it makes sense to go ahead and duress, right? And we see Divine Purge, which is really good to hit. And I know that they have a Grief now. And so I do want to be able to answer the Grief immediately, and also protect my Nightmare. So I want to be able to answer it with a March immediately. And I also want to be able to protect my the Sithonian Nightmare from being sniped by Grief, because it's my most important resource in this game right now. So I'm going to intentionally like sack this token, play out my Nightmares so that it's safe from a Grief, and set up for a March. And again, I'm sacrificing so that I can hold up the mana needed for March to hit their Grief or their Sword, right? Because it's not even important that I like kill the Grief as much as it is just hit the just hit something with March, right? Because you really like don't want to go deep and then be open. Like it's really hard to get hands that are discard proof. At this point, we have a count of 4, we have a count of 5. Like we kind of could, but you have to go really deep, and it's just not very likely. And they have a swords. It's just like I don't think it makes sense to do that at this point. And we're in a fine spot. And knowing that they have a swords, I know that I'm gonna have to like basically like protect my apprentice throughout the game, which is it's just really good to know that they do have the swords in hand. And we're gonna stay on our plan of just getting rid of the Grief as soon as we can, while getting a little bit of life gain. And again, we are kind of in the aggressive, like even though we're down on some life and stuff, like we are in the aggressive spot at this point in the game, because we have so much more board presence, and we're gonna be able to play a lot more creatures out, right? And so for the rest of the game, because I know they have that one swords, I'm going to be very deliberate about because basically like if I want to have a win without a combo kill, I'm going to need as many apprentices as I can get. And so I'm going to be very protective about my apprentices, and like holding up tower to protect them against swords of plowshares. And I don't have a way to get Soren down to 2, right? So there's no point in worrying about it, right? Because it only matters if you can get Soren to 2 loyalty or less, right? Because of the downtick. So we're just not going to worry about that yet. And now at this point, we also we don't want to I don't want to expose my Nightmare to Alinda draws, and so I am gonna like also like try and find lines that can protect my Nightmare 2 as well from Invoke the Divine. If it comes up, right? But without delaying my own game plan too much. And so here I'm really just like looking to close out the game. I think there's an argument to so here I go down to 4 because I'm worried about like the Sorin uptick that like does the lightning helix. But after like thinking about, and this is due to inexperience on my end, right? So you can't Sorin downtick, get a vampire. You can't get a vampire in play off Sorin and then uptick, right? You have to downtick at that turn. So really, what I should be doing is going down to 2 here and playing around Bowmasters. Because it's so unlikely for my opponent. They would have to have another Sorin in hand and then top deck the Alinda, Alinda out by down taking their first Sorin and then come out and like lightning helix off their second Sorin. So like it's just very unlikely for them to have that combination and it's not worth playing around. And I need to close out the game in a hurry because I know they do have good like top decks. So I think it's particularly it's Alinda, right? But I think I should have gone down to 2 life here instead just to maximize my chances of getting cards that are going to help me close out the game. And so notably, I do have surgical to play around like reanimates and stuff, but it's not. I mean, it's okay, right? But like at this point, I don't think a grief is too scary either, with our given the way our hand is. But we did successfully basically take our nightmare out of play to so like their best draw, their only draw to really get back in here as a game is a way to get a Linda in play. And so by at least like taking our nightmare off the board, we're minimizing the upside of them basically drawing to their only outs of like Alinda or Demonic Tutor for Alinda, right? Because I think at this point we can actually play through a resolved Alinda. It's not going to be fun and it's going to be very tough, but I think it's doable and that involves having access to a nightmare. And they just uptick Sorin, which is like really like really nice and pleasant for me because I don't have to worry about it. Now they do have a demonic tutor, which again like is still a bit confusing, right? Because to me, I think the clear play is for them to demonic tutor for Alinda. That's what I'm thinking. I it's a great card and like they already have the Sorin in play. To me they should have gotten the Alinda, and I think it's a bit of a point, a bit of a punt on their part. And so like I guess I'm like okay, they either messed up and got the Alinda late, or they got a different card, and they end up getting Meat Hook Massacre, which I just again I don't think this is a good play. I think Alinda like frees up the board way more and just has much more impact than this Meat Hook Massacre for X=1. And then here my opponent is tapped out, and they don't have swords, so which means they don't have swords active. And so I'm just gonna go for the double apprentice soft combo, and it's gonna end up being enough to win the game. Again, this is something I don't. At this point, I'm not calculating it out and calculating the lethal and saying, "Oh yes, I do this many loops, this many da da da." I just know that like, hey, look, I have 2 apprentices. My best play of winning this game is to get them down and just deal as much burn and close out the game as fast as I can. And I know that having 2 apprentices will let me play through this meat hook by like via like treasure triggers, and the fact that I have 2 in play is going to also be very important. And now with this loop, I am just going to have to make sure to just really like, yeah, just really, I mean, we just have to go all in here. I think that's our only play here. I think anything else is like a little silly. You just have to make a committing play, and it ends up being enough. And we actually deal a lot of damage, which is like really cool. Like I think they started this turn at 17, and they have a meat hook massacre in play, right? So this kind of shows the power of like these like soft combos with multiple apprentices. And I thought this was a really sick line. To do it through like a hate piece and without the full combo, right? I think it shows like a lot of resiliency in this deck. And I'm not going to speed through this because again, I just think this whole sequence is like pretty sick and like it's just like a very resourceful line in the deck that doesn't involve the full combo. And it doesn't matter whether I sack a servo or a dork. It's the same amount of mana either way because we're going to be getting back dorks the whole time anyways. Yeah, I think the game one here and this game both had like some of the coolest like finishes of the weekend for sure. And so yeah, just like that, we're gonna be up 5-1 on the weekend, which is sweet. And against the Grief Scam deck, 2-0 is like amazing. Here, going into match 7. Okay, this is one of those hands that you like you kind of have to keep it because it's good against like on the play you kind of have to keep it because it's good against like lure starts that have like well one is it's like pretty good against blue black, and then if they it's good against pride starts from energy, and so we're kind of obligated to keep it, and they end up having a guide on one, which is like not ideal. um but yeah, guide on one is like probably the just it's so much better than pride on one, especially like here, right? We just don't have as many ways to deal with guide of souls outside of March, and it just kind of builds and like builds reach, and like if it ever gets out of meat hook massacre range, it's also really annoying. And now they have Juggernaut Peddler on 2, which I know Courazeless only runs 2 main boards, so just like curving that into guide into Peddler is like already like pretty bad. And we have to use our mana here and just you know, play out Orcus Masters defensively. And they're gonna get to take our Necro, and we're not in a fun spot here against Marty Energy. And I know Diogenes is I've seen them on ladder. I had seen them on ladder quite a bit up until the Qualifier, so I kind of knew that they were on uh, Marty Luris as well. Now there's an argument to evoke Grief and also just like tutor for Necro here, which I think is, you know, might be the correct play, and we just kind of have to keep them off other stuff. Um, the issue, like, I'm not completely sure. I mean, Energy just has a lot of good options, and this is part of the issue with the matchup. And the issue is if I get Necro down and they have like multiple 2-drops, that they can play and like, you know, just like activate Guide of Souls. It's really I can't go too deep on my Necro, and it like, and then I'm dead to like if they resolve a bombardment, it's really bad. So I'm like kind of obligated to take the bombardment or any 2-drops in hand. So it's just like I don't have a lot of good options to take with Grief. Um, so there's that. Um, yeah, and so like I don't have a lot of good options, so I end up going for the Meat Hook Massacre because I think I kind of just have to like try and get that head like down like ahead of time and like still like kind of stay on schedule. And they Raptor into Orcus Bowmasters, right? But it's like all our Raptor hits are like pretty good, right? Outside of like maybe like swords and static prison, they're like those are like probably the worst hits. Um, I don't know. Like here, I think my opponent just kind of has the goods. They're just they have the guide on one start, and like I'm gonna have to like meat hook massacre for a lot, and but their guide's still gonna be alive. And we're just like pretty behind here, which sucks. And like and this is kind of the issue with the matchup is like there's just a lot of cards that energy has that are really good, and it's hard to like account for all of them. And so now this guy is just gonna like stay pressuring us in place, and we kind of have to draw to a march, but we also like need to get Necro down at some point to like kind of close out the game because we can't like fairly like kill through a guide unless we can get like a nightmare or something and get that going. And they still have like 4 cards in hand and are drawing another card, right? So like it's like we haven't even played through like all the resources just yet. They have the Ajani, which like is fine, right? But it means like they can just make Guided Souls bigger. And they have the Sithonian Nightmare to flip the Ajani and get the red card. So I don't know. I think this is like one of those like okay, like it's I wouldn't show this in a video like on my own because it's not like it's just kind of getting run over by energy. Honestly, there's not like there aren't a lot of like interesting decision points in this, and like my opponent just kind of has the goods. Like they just kind of have enough gas to keep going and like keep me off the game, and they even get to peddling me again for good measure. They're not even trying to flip you a Johnny just yet. Um, I knew going into qualifier weekend that the Mardu Energy was probably the toughest matchup for Jetstorm just because they have so many unique effects that you can't like fully play around all of them. And I tried to fix it by running 2 more meat hooks in the board. But again, they just have like random reach, random interaction that hits that's generic. They run like a needle, they run like a hearse. Like it's just a very like thin spread of a lot of different hate cards, and like they just have a lot of pressure. So yeah, I think this is just kind of getting run over by energy, honestly. Um, I don't have anything that can keep up with this, and they're gonna be looping peddlers and like keeping me off any like action, right? That's like meaningful. Yeah, again, there's just a lot of variance in their draws, and you can't really like play around all of them in a given game based on like how the decks are set up. And so, I mean, you can tell this game's pretty over. I ended up playing it out because it's qualifier weekend, but yeah, it's we don't even have like Necro's not even a good top deck at this point because like we're gonna go to 8. Uh, like if we block the peddler, no, I'm sorry, we're going to like 4, right? And then like so we've already played our Meat Hook Massacre, so that's already off the table. Sorry, we're going to 2. Like the game's just super over, and we don't have any good plays. And it's like we're not even too deep in the game, right? It's like turn 5. They just had the goods here. And so here I'm going with like just kind of like my standard sideboard plan of like bringing in mites, bringing in Meat Hook Massacres, taking out the griefs. I have been considering just taking out some amount of DIs against Mardu because what happens is like you get turn 2 Necro off of DIs sometimes, but it's like pretty easy to interact with. Or like Mardu interacts with it a bit more consistently, and like something I've also realized is that like your DI, your turn 2 DI for Necros, they're just not as powerful as like a Phyrexian Tower turn 2 Necro, where you get the extra treasure off the door, or like a turn 1 Necro. I mean, obviously, but it just the DI for Necro ritual combo just ends up being, I think, a bit too slow against energy for what they're doing, and like you kind of need to just have these really fast starts against energy, I think, or like have them, you know, get bad moles. But you kind of need these really fast starts. So I've been toying with you know, cutting like a couple DIs against energy, especially on the draw. But we'll see. Okay, anyways, going into game two. So we have a okay, well this is a mole, we know we can't use this. And we have a turn two necro here, so we're pretty priced into keeping. And also, so something too is like with playing this deck is like when you're playing against better players like Diogenes that have like good experience against the list, they'll kind of understand. So like anytime I play a dork on turn one, it means you basically have a DI, or it means you're very likely to have like a DI or a Phyrexian Tower set up to Necro. And so they very correctly end up casting Prismatic Ending on the dork, which, you know, you think it's like, oh no, I want to get like premium value out of it. No, this is a really good play on their part, and it's actually gonna really slow us down this game off of our turn two neck on the play, right? And so actually, like, if I had a, I've also been testing just running more copies of Grief over Bowmasters, and like, so something interesting here is like, just because you kind of need some of these like faster starts to compete with energy more. Um, Interestingly, like we could have had a Grief into a neck or a Necro if we had Grief instead of Bowmasters here. And they have a Juggernaut Peddler after you know, being able to ending our dork. Um, we're just super behind for the rest of the game, right? Because we're no longer gonna have a Necro, and yeah, I mean they're just limiting our options quite a bit, right? Just by cutting off our access to the tower and cutting and then cutting off our access to the Necro in hand. And so because we are so kind of like super behind, we kind of just have to like get a like try and just get a Necro down next turn, like just like pretty desperately. And like Swords of Plowshares isn't even that great of a hit off a Raptor, right? But it cuts us off of Necro for yet another turn. And it's just gonna be like another turn that we're getting pressured. While they develop their board and they were kind of able to like catch up. So like basically because, you know, we're like a turn three, turn four combo at bet like, you know, on our best days, and like just buying the extra like turn or two for energy is like very big for them. And it means we can't dig as deep on our Necro when we do finally like get it down and resolved. And I go no blocks here because I need to activate tower next turn to get my Necro down. And they have a second peddler, so I don't even get my, I'm not even gonna be able to get my Necro down next turn. It's like even if I do get Necro down, they have 6 power in play. I'm gonna have one creature because I sacked one to tower. I'm just in a very tough spot. And so yeah, I think this game was kind of a combination of a very tight, correct play by Diogenes. And they also like kind of ran well a bit, but it wasn't like I wouldn't say like exceptionally well or anything. Like I think these are like all reasonable draws from like upper, you know, upper like 75th percentile like hands from energy in this particular matchup, right? So like these like very reasonable like strong draws just like kind of run us over. Yeah, I mean you can maybe say they got a bit luckier game one, depending on how many peddlers they were running. But it's potential. It's, you know, they could be on 4 peddlers, they could be on 2 peddlers. We don't know. But yeah, I think this is part of the issue. Is like I think at the higher level, for the Jetstorm energy matchup does feel a bit worse on the Jetstorm side. Again, we just like we have two juggernauts in hand, you know, from getting disrupted, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I think this is a tough matchup. I could see, you know, in the future, as like if Marty Metashare ever decreases, I think Jet's like well positioned into like show and tell and other combo lists, while also like being pretty reasonable in the blue black. And so like I if there's a deck that comes out, you know, like I know Black White Belcher has been pretty popular lately, that helps reduce the energy meta share. I think that does, particularly with Mardu. I think that does kind of open up Jetstorm a bit more for like a better performance in the meta, or like, you know, tournament like this. And like here they kind of like clearly have a second Bowmasters, but I still don't have like very good blocks. And I have to block around lethal. So I kind of have to go with this. Because I can't play, I can't even play around a second Bowmasters at this point. All of our Necro top decks are like pretty dead. We kind of need like specifically like Ritual to turn on Meat Hook, but they also know the Meat Hook is coming. Just very tough spot. And here I also kind of I have to save my Apprentice so that I have enough mana to cast Meat Hook next turn. Because I have to activate Tower to get my mana for Meat Hook. My opponent correctly doesn't play out their Bowmasters because they know I have the Meat Hook in hand. And see, now the issue here is even though I'm resolving the Meat Hook, I'm still off of like, I need a creature in play to get Necropotence down, so I would have to like top deck a Dork or something, or like a Ritual, which like I have 12 outs to each draw step, but it's still just a very tough spot to be in. Um, yeah, I mean you know, we have about like three kind of activish cards and Necro. I mean, March or Necro's like kind of dead at this point, so we kind of have like two activish cards with like Apprentice and March. Um, and our opponent still has 4 cards in hand and Guide Pride. So it's just very tough spot. Again, like I think this is something that you know, this game just like wasn't really, there weren't a lot of interesting decision points. They just interacted with us quite a bit. They had like a pretty decent draw, and yeah, there's just not a lot. They're playing around everything very well. Like this is a very tight play on their part, and it's just I don't think there's a lot that's interesting with this game. Like I think this like kind of just highlights like kind of like a kind of like just like a classic case of like this is kind of a bad matchup, and like this is why this is a bad matchup is seeing like these games play out like this. Like we just have so few top decks here, if you think about it, right? And then they get the bombardment down and the game's over. But it's okay. I mean, we're gonna be 5-2 after this point, right? And so still like hopeful about the weekend at this point. But and like okay, we have the meat hook down before the bombardment, but like again, like they're gonna get a lot of tokens, they're gonna gain a lot of life, and the game's just gonna be out of hand. Like even if we block here, they kind of probably just kill our apprentice anyways, and we're cut off Phyrexian Tower again, and then we just have Necro and 2 Juggernauts in hand. Like we don't have a lot of options here. I'm kind of just playing it out because I don't want to concede early on the qualifier weekend. And I can't get any life back with March at this point because of they can just sack it to bombardment in response. So I would need like a might and a March, right? When I was trying to keep my apprentice alive, just like kind of maybe like drawn to a meat hook and like cast another one, but doesn't even matter. They end up killing it anyways with bombardment. Yeah, tough matchup, but 5-2 on the weekend. Okay, now we're going into match 8 of qualifier weekend, day 1. Here we can't really keep this one lander. We don't have enough action, especially against especially against like no companion. This hand is also just way too many lands. We can't really do a lot, and it's just like way too slow against no companion as well. So we're gonna have to go to 5. You could justify keeping this 5 and just kind of need to hit lands. We're gonna go a bit deeper, and we go with 4, and I think because it's no companion, we're gonna end up keeping Necro and Jet Medallion because that gives us the most outs to turn 4, and we kind of just have to go with it. And they show black white, which means they're on Sorentel. And they are on Troll Reanimate, which like immediately tells me that they're on Reanimate, which most Sorentel lists were running. But Troll is like not every deck runs Troll. I don't think it's that good, but it just really clarifies that they're on Reanimate. And we're gonna stick with their plan of getting a medallion down turn 2, giving us a count of 5, and probably go for a big Necro turn 3 if they don't put a lot of pressure into play. And at this point, I'm wondering what the hell they kept with no plays on 3 and surveilling Ephemerate into the bin. It kind of feels like they haven't really passed priority to have Solitude Scam. So I'm keeping that in mind, but I'm not really sure what they've kept at this point. And I did miss my 3rd land drop, so I am just gonna get my 3rd land drop into play to set up a Necro next turn, and it's gonna increase my count by 1, right? And I end up binning so the effect of Bowmasters doesn't really matter in this matchup because they don't draw cards. And I want to have the Bowmasters available in my bin for any nightmares at this point. And I'm going to take a Bloomin' Marsh off of the DI because I need my 3rd land drop. You could argue to take Tower, but I want to get my Marionette Apprentice into play. And with this, by taking the Marsh, it makes me less likely to draw the Marsh later into the game. where it's going to be a tap land. And they do have a Bowmasters, which you know, is not that big of a deal. It's like pretty like easy to deal with in general. Um, and they do draw the Soaring combo, draw into it, right? Because they didn't turn 3 it, so they clearly drew a missing piece at some point. And this really sucks. In this matchup, you really want to avoid Alinda being able to invoke the Divine, either your Medallion or your Nightmare. And you know, it's not that big of a deal against Necro, but so they're able to like get this really big value play out of Alinda, and we're pretty behind at this point, even though we have a Necro. And so we do get a March, which is really good because it means we're gonna be able to fight through Alinda, but it still like might end up being a bit slow. I think if I had like tutored for a Phyrexian Tower over a Blooming Marsh, I think the play actually, I think we're actually able to march and uh, we're able to march and Necro in the same turn, and so I think that actually really matters. And so I think in hindsight, also you just really want access to your first tower, right? So I think in hindsight, um, I think it was correct to get the Phyrexian Tower over the Blooming Marsh off my DI earlier, but you know, here we are. And so the issue is now is that they're going to actually get to they're going to be able to activate Alinda again, and just create another 4/4 token. And we're not going to really have a way to deal with their board outside of the one meat hook we have in our deck. And we actually are going to keep our Necropotence here for the sake of pitching it to March, because we already have a land drop return that's Phyrexian Tower, and we're going to need to like basically resolve a big March. And they do top deck the Grief, which like sucks. They should definitely take March here. They end up taking Nightmare, which is unexpected. But I really think they should have taken the March here. I think the March is like all of our, or like a lot of our counterplay. Granted, we could get it with intent, but then we're using another creature. Like it just makes us use more, and then makes us use more resources for the March. But yeah. So I think this is a slight misplay by my opponent taking the Nightmare over the March, given the context of the board and how the game's going. And again, like going into this weekend, I just did not have a lot of experience against good Sorrentail, like really strong Sorrentail players that are like, you know, like qualify weekend like tier players. Usually the pilots that I ran into were a bit more like haphazard and like kind of kept questionable moles and stuff like that. Like they might have been just trying the deck. Um, and I think in the future, you know, I want more testing and going against this kind of list. Yeah. Because it's very weird because they have these like grief scam starts which are good, but and the like occasional like much less likely like Soren Alinda starts, but you're a much more consistent Necro deck, and so it's very confusing to see how that plays sometimes. Okay, and they do have the Solitude here. It's not the worst thing, but it is just gonna like really manage our board pretty well. You know, they're just throwing a lot of power at us. I think. So I think this is an early concession. Let me just pause it. I think on this board, right? I think we can actually just like chump here and like go for a really big march. And then you chump here, you know, we'll go to 7 life. We'll say, you know, play out Apprentice, save up for a really big march with the rest of our remaining life for draw for 6, and try and basically set up a turn where we can march their Alinda, survive the following attack from their creatures, and then play a big meat hook for like 5 or 6. And I think it's like playable from our side. It's still like very, very, very tough. But I do think this was an early concession, and like maybe this like this was a result of like me tilting a bit from like game 7. Or match 7, I did kind of just get run over by my Mardu opponent. And now I'm kind of like feeling like, oh, that, you know, they top deck you know, they were able to draw into the Soren Alinda combo, and they like top deck their grief, and I feel bad. But like I think this game state is like I still have like a non-zero amount of equity in this game, and I do think this is an early concession. And so again for boarding for here, I think I've started taking out my griefs against Sorntel because they do run reanimate, but I'm still just like not super sure about it. And like there's this idea of like it's interesting because we don't really get to disrupt their grief draws too much with the rest, but and we are just like a much more consistent deck than they are. So like if we're ever cutting combo pieces to disrupt their less consistent combo, I don't think it's necessarily the best idea. I think in the future I would just kind of just start like like maybe play some baubles on the play and just kind of have this idea that okay and have this idea in like quiet confidence that like okay our combo is more consistent like in a probabilistic sense, and so we should just be really focusing in on our combo and kind of making them interact with us first rather than like trying to throw off their like less consistent combos that are more resilient and like use less resources. Because they just have a bunch of AB combos with like Grief, Reanimate, Soren, and Alinda, and so they kind of end up top decking better than us. But their starts are just not very consistent because they don't have as much redundancy as we do. So here you could argue for keeping the 7, but I end up not. I feel like we need a stronger hand. No lands there, and we end up going to 5. Now we can at least like protect our demonic tutor somewhat here with the rest. So we are going to keep this 5. I think this is like a decent enough top 5 to go with. And I am keeping a dork just to keep my like DI outs active, but you could also argue for having the medallion on 2 as well. And they just kind of keep like a grief ephemerate hand, right? Which is like perfectly reasonable, and we're able to take them off grief ephemerate, which is really big. And it kind of justifies our Mortal 5 over the Multu 7 a bit, because we are like disrupting a very annoying combo that would put us out of a lot of resources. Yeah, and there's a lot of different openings in this matchup that I haven't really tested enough to see them all like kind of play out and how those games go. Just like the grief starts. I think the Soren start is like pretty unplayable. But these like grief starts are like kind of bad as well, but then like the like troll reanimate starts are not that bad for us, which they keep sometimes too. And our opponent does end up just drawing another dark ritual and hard casting grief. But it's not the worst for us. They've used all their fats mana, and it's basically like a 3-for-2 in our favor. But yeah, I mean we're off our necro plan now, and they have a grief in play. And we are just gonna like go ahead and play out our material. And so they don't attack here notably, which kind of tells me they probably don't have anything in hand. And we do use our life total as a resource more than our opponent who only runs like reanimate. And so now the fact that they do attack here versus not attacking last turn tells me that they drew something. It's either like a swords or a bowmasters is what I'm thinking. Because they wouldn't do this attack if they had reanimate, because they would just like reanimate the Erlinda or like reanimate the troll, right? I mean, they'd reanimate the Erlinda. Okay, and so with having access to 3 dorks now, I don't mind going for the double block at this point, and just kind of drawing out whatever removal they have. I think there is an argument to just hold up Shambling Gas and go for the triple block. I think all in all that play is probably better. Actually, no, it's not. I don't like it because so the reason we're not going for triple block here is because we want to keep our DI outs active, right? If we don't have a creature in play and we draw DI, it's super terrible, and we're just kind of in the waiting room again, and we don't get to be mana efficient. It's really, really bad. So we have to keep a creature in play for this matchup to in these low resource matchups, especially like against grief scam stuff where everyone only is like kind of top decking mode. You want to keep your DIs active. That's a big thing. And our opponent has an Ashiok, which I've never seen from Swarntel ever. I don't think I've ever seen it post board against like a meta deck up until this point. And this does cut off our DI top decks, which like sucks, right? And it's like really annoying, and we no longer have any of our dorks in the bin. And I do draw the March, and I either need to commit to marching this Ashiok or marching this Grief. The Grief is like kind of playing out my life total quite a bit, but at the same time, the Ashiok is cutting off a lot of my top decks. And it will kind of, it doesn't cut off my graveyard combo at all, but it like cutting off 5 of my top decks is really annoying, especially given that there's some of my better top decks to like get ahead in this game. And I ended up deciding to march the Grief. I'm not sure if this is the correct play, but it's what I end up doing. Notably, I should have done this march. If I'm gonna commit to marching the Grief, I should have done it during my turn so that my opponent doesn't have ephemerate outs to stop the life gain and save their Grief, right? Because they were tapped out. And so we're kind of at parity, but they do have our tutors turned off, which is kind of like our big like way to like break the game open, right? Which like we would have to just draw, we just have to rip the necro. And so I am gonna, and because they're not at a like a, you know, they're at like 13 life, I'm gonna value hitting the Ashiok first. And they do just have the solitude and are able to hardcast it, which really sucks. And they still, again, they still have the Ashiok in play, which is really tough. Swamp's no good here, but we are just like gonna have this plan of pressuring the Ashiok, and hopefully we can, you know, they let us kill the Ashiok so that we can tutor for outs should we draw into him. And we actually don't have that many tutors even left in the deck at this point, with 2 DIs and a DT down. But I still think it's worth killing the Ashiok. And they top deck a Bowmasters, which again is really good. And notably here, because yeah, because their Ashiok is at I think I would have liked to see myself scry to the top here just to get their Ashiok to activate again. Usually in these cases, when you scry to the top, their Ashiok is just going to they are just going to activate Ashiok and lose loyalty. So it makes sense to just kind of provoke your opponent into activating Ashiok. And I'm going to play the Nightmare out here to play around another like top deck Grief or a reanimated Grief. And they do just draw another Bowmasters, right? And so they're putting a lot of pressure on my life total at this point. And it's a very, very tough spot. And here I actually am going to go ahead and top the, you know, amend my last mistake by topping a card that I know is bad to induce my opponent to activate their Ashiok and turn off their Ashioks, preventing the tutoring effects. And so we're at 1 life now, which is a really bad spot to be. And we just top deck a gas and the game's over. So unlucky O2, I think I had a lot of matchup inexperience for Swarntel and kind of wish I prepped a bit more into it. But yeah, that was and that ended up being my weekend. So that's end up 5-3 on the weekend, with one of those wins being an instant concession. Okay, so I would say all in all, I'm happy with my like personal like gameplay during this weekend. I don't think there are like too many egregious punts. I think I had like an early concession against Thorntel towards the end. I think, you know, I had good sideboarding prep towards the big 3, and I was able to like win all the show and tell matchups. It's really cool. With Mardu, I kind of realized that even though I had a good matchup against Mardu on Untapped and like a good win rate against it, the matchup in practice against like top players was just not very good. I think it was probably like 35 to 40% equity for the Jet Storm side. And you know, I was kind of playing with the idea of running 4 Grief over 2 Bowmasters, and just the argument is that you get more fast starts with Disruption with Grief, and that you kind of just need to be a lot more unfair to win these like Mardu matchups and like really keep them off like Bombardment or like some of their synergy cards, right? But like, we won all our show and tell matches, was pretty good. I will say that I still think this deck is very good. I think the Mardu-ish, I could see it getting more equity in the metagame if Mardu Metashare like ever decreases. Like I know like Black White Belcher is kind of becoming more popular now, and that's very very uh it's it has a very good matchup into Mardu, and I could see that hurting the Mardu Metashare a bit. Um, I think I don't know. I feel like it's going to be hard for in the future for Jetstorm to just have good representation in general in these timeless tournaments because one, it's very very difficult to pilot like properly, and so that's going to like deter a lot of people from playing it in the first place. And so and then the people that do play like they have to play it really well, right? To like have the deck be like get its maximum performance. And then so because there's not that many like really really strong pilots at the moment, and it's not really conducive to like a new pilot is not going to be able to just pick it up over a weekend, right? So it's going to be hard to have enough good pilots in the field on a given like weekend and get good results. And so like I definitely like did feel some pressure to uh really like day two and like do the best I can, right, to try and argue for this deck. I still think this deck is really good. I still think it's in like a really like good position in the meta, outside of that Mardu matchup. And so like, and you do have this like unique access to like these very like silver bullety sideboard cards with like surgical and like your grief surgical combos and stuff that I think was really impressive this weekend. But yeah, I would say I'm really like happy with how this deck is going. But I think like going forward with content in the channel, I am gonna kind of I've been enjoying like Black White Belcher quite a bit lately, and I have I've iterated on this like John Delirium list that is also really fun. And so I think in the future, uh, I will be playing like other decks on this channel that are in the timeless format. I still really enjoy Jetstorm. It still like has a very very special place in my heart for like how complicated the combo was, and like just the intricacy of play patterns that come with it. But I do kind of want to like highlight other decks, and I like going up into this like prep for this tournament and for qualifier weekend, I only played Jetstorm. I would see a bunch of fun brews and I would refrain from playing them because if I started playing Jund Breach just for fun, I might start thinking about those lines and putting a lot more thought into the how oh, what are these like cool Jund Breach lines and stuff like that, and it might take away from the thought that I was putting into Jetstorm. And so it was just like it was probably like a month straight of just grinding Jetstorm and really trying to figure the deck out and like consider other play patterns, that like consider like lines within Jetstorm because there's a lot of depth here. And so I'm going to be taking a bit of a break from Jetstorm in the meantime, but I think also with my content I'm going to be trying to instead of like trying to be like for the like Jetstorm guide, I really wanted a like very tight knit, perfect, like very perfectionist guide to the point where like it took a very very long time for me to make, and I'm gonna try and take a step back from that a bit as well in my videos, and then decrease the quality a bit in lieu of having more quantity of videos and being able to put out more content and gameplay and stuff like that on a more reasonable basis, rather than like one content like every single I like once a month. I think I've been putting out a video, and so I'm gonna switch to that. And yeah, I'm super excited. I really want to post about the Black White Belcher list a bit. Again, it's that and Jund Delirium I think have been my like go-tos on ladder, and I've been doing really well. I think I peaked at rank 3 on ladder this current month of October. And but I do kind of also understand my niche as being a Necropotence player at this point. And so I do understand that the Black White Belcher list is kind of going to have more interesting decisions. And so I'm going to prioritize that. But eventually at some point I want to post some Jund Delirium gameplay because I do think that is a very interesting deck as well. But all in all, 5-3 on the qualifier weekend, day 1. I'm happy with it. Wish I did better. Wish I ran a bit better. Maybe made some iffy mulligan decisions, and my sideboarding for the non-big 3 matchups was not as refined as it could have been. But yeah, really happy. I think the deck's great. Yeah, let me know what y'all think.